They say there's a saying that what energy is for mitigation, water is for adaptation. So water ecosystems, if they are being degraded, we're not going to achieve our goals on adaptation.
Hey everyone, we are excited to launch a new podcast series in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, The Road to COP30. Throughout September, we'll be speaking with leaders from the Nature Conservancy across Latin America to explore their work ahead of COP30, taking place this November in Pará State, Brazil. On episode 3, we sit down with two leaders from the Nature Conservancy, Fernanda Silva, Amazon freshwater fisheries scientist, and Flavia Loris, Global Freshwater Policy Advisor. Together, they shed light on the interconnectedness of water, climate policy, and the livelihoods of Amazonian communities. Freshwater ecosystems are more than natural resources. They are lifelines that provide food security, cultural identity, and stability for millions, while also shaping global climate patterns. This conversation is a call to action, underscoring the urgent need for integrated policies and community-driven solutions to secure a sustainable future for the Amazon and for us all. I want to welcome everyone back to our series with the Nature Conservancy, The Road to COP30. This is episode 3. Today we're focusing on community-led conservation of freshwater and fisheries. And we have two leaders from the Nature Conservancy, someone from the global team, as well as the team in Latin America joining us today. First, we have Flavia Loris, the Global Advisor on Water Policy, and we have Fernanda Silva, the Amazon freshwater fishery scientist. Thank you both for being here. Flavia, could you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, as well as what your role is with the Nature Conservancy.
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a lawyer at the Nature Conservancy, providing policy advice and developing policy analysis from the global to the local level. So work a little bit with the global conventions, but then also thinking about the needs of our countries where we work on the ground at the transboundary level as a middle way. So really making those vertical and horizontal connections. And I work very closely with our countries in Africa and Latin America, developing approaches to conservation as a tool for conservation of freshwater resources and freshwater biodiversity.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm very excited to kind of lean into the policy aspect of all of this and how policy plays a role in freshwater protection and fishery protection. And then, Fernanda, if you want to talk a little bit about your background as well as what you do with the Nature Conservancy.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and to talk about fisheries. I am a biologist, and I work as a fishery scientist at TNC. I'm supporting teams, local teams that work on the ground in the Amazon countries that are supporting projects with the aim to support communities to develop the management, the community-based management, as we know that these initiatives are very important for fisheries conservation.
Well, thank you, Fernanda, and thank you, Flavia, both for taking the time again and speaking on freshwaters and fisheries as we lead into COP30. I know this will be a big topic that's discussed at the event in Brazil. But the first thing I'll kind of kick off with, Fernanda, is just a question on the importance of freshwater in the Amazon. I think a lot of us, I know especially, in the U.S., we think of the Amazon and we think of the rainforest. We think of a forest, this vast forest. We hear things like, it's the Amazon rainforest is a carbon sink, and it produces so many good ecological benefits for the world. But I think a lot of times what's missed is the impact and importance of freshwater. So the question I'll start off with asking you is, why are freshwater ecosystems in the Amazon so critical, both for the region in Latin America and for global climate stability?
Thank you. I think you provided already a very nice understanding about how people see the Amazon. when we think about Amazon, people mostly think about these big forests and these tall trees, and most of people forget the network of rivers and lakes and wetlands that are very important to also to the forest, because we have a strong connectivity among all these ecosystems, the fresh water and the forest. And first of all, the fresh water in the Amazon hosts a huge biodiversity. About 15% of the no freshwater fisher biodiversity, it's in the Amazon. So it's a big biodiversity in just one place. And it's also important for provide food for almost 50 million of people. So all these waters provide especially fish as food for the people that live in this area. And also when we think about Amazon, everything moves on the water. So the rivers are very important for transportation, and even for to store carbon and to control the regime of rain. So it's not only important locally, but it's also important globally, as the way that it's controlling the climate with this rain regime.
And then I would ask you a question too, Flavia. I mean, to Fernanda's point here, I mean, a lot of people will look at the Amazon and see a rainforest, and that's kind of the visual that you see. And we also think of like climate policy and how the Amazon rainforest can play a role, and how, maybe different policies can protect areas of the Amazon. But, why should rivers, lakes, and wetlands be just as central in climate policy discussions as the forest is?
Yes, that's a good question. The answer is not applicable exclusively to the Amazon, because that's a trend we see. The climate space started very much focused on mitigation, because ideally, if we had done our work right with mitigation, we wouldn't be here at the stage of adaptation and loss and damage. So adaptation from the beginning was the underdog. And freshwater in the context of adaptation, even more problematic and more overlooked. And freshwater, just thinking as an example, water is crucial for the energy transition, right? So we need water for mining. We need water for all kinds of renewable energies, for biofuels. So it's there in mitigation. It's also there as a nature-based solutions, because peatlands have more carbon even than forest, and that includes these ecosystems in the Amazon. And to this date, we still don't see enough of carbon markets focused on peatlands. And then lastly, for adaptation, they say, there's a saying that what energy is for mitigation, water is for adaptation. So water ecosystems, if they are being degraded, we're not going to achieve our goals on adaptation. So I think to go back to the question of policy, what we need is a more integrated approach to how we govern, to the laws that we issue, between climate, biodiversity, and freshwater, not leaving other things outside, but really covering this gap that we see at the national level, often at the transboundary level, which is more water, less climate, and then finally at the global level, which is much more energy and forest and ocean, but then freshwater gets overlooked. So we need to revisit our policies at all the different levels, so that there's more integration between climate and the role of freshwater and the vulnerability of freshwater ecosystems with climate change.
Yeah, you bring up the need for water with things like mining, renewable energy. I know with something like nuclear, water is crucial for cooling systems and making sure that these facilities don't overheat. And then also, I mean, what I see and what I do in the manufacturing world, water is critical as well. So water is needed in so many different applications. And, I would ask you, and this is just kind of spitballing here, do you see, in the future, different, let's say, private sector, companies looking at the Amazon's, water supply as something that could kind of solve, some of these issues around like water needed for mining, water needed for renewable energy, water needed for manufacturing? But that kind of brings us into a conversation on, the economics that would benefit the economics, but might not benefit the environmental. So yeah, just spitballing here, but what you see like in the future, different private sector companies looking at the Amazon as kind of a resource for water that they could use, and maybe there's some aspect of policy that would be in that as well.
Yes. So Brazil is very strong now on bioeconomy, right, Fernanda, which relates a lot to local communities, but we also have the farmers, large scale farming in the Amazon that directly depend on water. We have mining that also depends on water, and especially illegal gold mining. So when TNC, for example, works at the global level on the Minamata Convention on Mercury, we are trying to address the um, the negative effects of mining, of illegal gold mining, through policies. So then we have available and clean freshwater resources and freshwater fisheries for other needs. So thinking about small scale private sector to larger scale, bioeconomy can it encompasses all of it. And in the end of the day, Preston, as you said it yourself, fresh water is needed across food security, energy security, biodiversity conservation. If we don't have the private sector on board, it's going to get much harder because and that's not just in the Amazon. And that's why TNC has a strong partnership with companies all over the world. And one of our strategies is working with the development institutions to mainstream nature-based solutions into how they think about infrastructure, where you can have a policy for recharge of aquifers instead of by building a new dam, and what kind of policies do you need to enable those, to make those cost effective. So for example, when you have a licensing policy, could you include a requirement or an encouragement for the developer to look at the gray infrastructure alternative in conjunction with what we call the green and blue infrastructure? So how do you use policy to scale what we refer to blue and green infrastructure to complement, to add value, to just, instead of just building more infrastructure? And that's a place that financing institutions and the private sector are critical.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up this term of bioeconomy. This is episode 3 in the series, but episode 4 is actually an episode on socio-bioeconomy in the Amazon, and it's very interesting as we hear, I think Juliana and Lisa Ferguson, break down the socio-bioeconomy, looking in Pot of State specifically, which is where COP30 is. So yeah, everyone stay tuned for that episode as well. But Fernanda, I did want to bring it back to you for a second. And just, understanding your perspective, being in Latin America, as well as your role, as this freshwater fishery scientist in the Amazon. But, from your perspective on the ground, what's the connection between healthy rivers and healthy communities inside, let's say, the Amazon?
Yeah, as I said, Amazon, it's water. Now, all the communities depend on the water about for water provision, for the culture, the culture that it's linked to the water. It's very strong. For example, we have many municipalities that people have festivals that celebrate fish, and many of the aquatic biodiversity. So there is this strong connection. And the Amazon communities are the ones that consume more fish in the world. So it's about half kilograms by person by day. So anywhere else in the world consume so much fish as Amazon communities. So if we don't have a health environment, if we don't have a health river or health lakes, we will not have healthy communities, healthy people. And for example, in 2023, when we had a strong drought season here in the Amazon, we had some problems about transportation because most of the river dried, and we had problem. Communities were isolated. The quality of the water was poor, and many people was sick about this lack of quality in the water. So if we don't have a healthy river, we will not have a health people and healthy communities.
Yeah, I think the key theme there is, in the note that I have down, is fisheries are a lifeline for food security, culture, and livelihoods. And now, I mean, correct me here, but now they're kind of under climate threat. So this is why a conversation like this is so important to help people understand, what the importance is, and how many people in these communities rely on things like fisheries in the Amazon, and then how can we kind of shift the narrative to where it's not a threat, but it's actually thriving. So. And you might have answered this in your previous answer, Fernanda, but I think the other question I asked, let me look. Yeah, I'd asked between, what's the connection between healthy rivers and healthy communities? But now if we look specifically at the fisheries, where I would say your expertise lies, how central are these fisheries for Amazonian communities? I mean, you talked about healthy livelihoods, how they rely on this on these fisheries for sustenance and food, but just from a cultural aspect, as well as the nutrition value of it, how central are these to the Amazon inside this region?
Yeah, as I comment, we have these people that depend very much from fish. Most of local communities uh, consume fish during the daily dietary. So we have this strong connection, a strong cultural connection, and fish in freshwater fisheries is also very important because these fish they have more nutrients that most of the land based meat or protein. So freshwater fisheries, we have a high levels of omega-3, iron, zinc. So it's very important for nutrition. So if if these communities cannot access this source of food, it's a problem for nutrition in that region, and also for livelihood. Most of these communities depend on fisheries as a livelihood. They they the way of for them to have money and to have as a way to survive, it's through fisheries. So it's a very important way of life in the Amazon.
Yeah, I just wrote down the quote that you said of most of these communities rely on fisheries as a lifeline. When we start thinking of climate impacts, like let's say droughts or altered flood cycles, that might deter or damage these fish populations. what are these climate impacts that you're seeing right now in the Amazon? Maybe it is, droughts, maybe it is, these flood cycles. But, how do these impact not only the environment, but the communities as a whole? Because back to what you said, most of these communities rely on fisheries as a lifeline. If we're seeing climate change impact these rivers and these fisheries, and let's say maybe fish populations are decreasing, now you're going to have a problem with these communities who rely on the fish and these fisheries as a lifeline. So yeah, I'm just kind of interested in, these climate impacts. Are fish, populations declining? And then what does that look like for the communities who rely on these fish again as a lifeline?
Yeah, in the Amazon, what we are seeing is the frequency of droughts, the increase of frequency and duration of droughts and floods. So this is disrupting all the life cycle of the species. So and there is, as we are having all these different seasonality, we are seeing problems in many fish that cannot reproduce or cannot survive. For example, we are seeing many lakes that are drowning, and most of fish are just dying without water or without oxygen. And this impacts fisheries for sure, because we are losing most of the stocks, and all these difference in the life cycle of these fishes are forbidding them to reproduce. So we are seeing all these, we are already seeing all these impacts. And the good thing is the communities, they have a very strong knowledge about the environment, so they know when the river is drying, and they can see that, oh, if this river is drying, we will have a not very good fishery season in this year. So they are very good to predict what can happen in that environment and with the fishery. So if we can take advantage of this knowledge to plan policies and management actions, we can better adapt to these impacts. So it's something that we as TNC, we are working with communities to develop these adaptation strategies, as we are already seeing all these changes in the environment, and these changes it will be the new rule. We are facing this in the last 10 years, this increasing in droughts and floods, and it's been very frequent, and we need to adapt to it. And the good thing that we can take advantage of all these local knowledge to develop these adaptation strategies.
Yeah, I think what the listeners will get out of this series, is one of the main takeaways between all 6 episodes we have is when Indigenous people are in control of areas of the Amazon, those areas perform higher from an environmental and ecological point of view. Once you give Indigenous communities ownership of these areas, they protect these areas, and the global community is better off for it because, as we know, the Amazon rainforest can regulate, carbon in the atmosphere. It's seen as a carbon sink. But I did want to drill down on what you said for 1 second, Fernanda, before we kind of look at policy with Flavia. You had talked about how local communities, these knowledge systems are so important to, I would say, sustainable fisheries management. You talked about the Nature Conservancy and what the organization's working to do. But do you have any examples of how the Nature Conservancy has, worked with Indigenous communities with sustainable fisheries management, or maybe just, case studies in general about what the Nature Conservancy is doing around adaptation strategies inside, these local communities?
Yeah, our approach is to work together with communities. So we build all our actions and our support based in their needs and what they about using they take advantage of their knowledge, and also they as they already had they are managing the territory for centuries, so they know how to do it. So we are there just to support. And the main role of TNC in this situation is to build the bridge or the partnership and the recognition from the government to these communities, to provide them this ownership to manage and to preserve their territories. So as example, in the Pará state, TNC was a key actor to work together with communities, with local organizations, to with the government, the state government, to have a decree or to have a regulation that recognize these communities as the owners, the ones that have the rights to manage it and to protect their territory. So, for example, in this fisheries management, now the communities are being recognized as the ones that are able to develop the rules and to manage the fisheries. So the communities decide when to fish, how to fish, who can fish, and in their territories. So it's not more a top-down decision. It's not the government saying, now the fisheries in the state, the Pará state, will be regulated by the government. For sure, we will still have some rules that is dictated by the government, but most of this regulation or this management about fisheries, it's being done by communities. So now the government recognize these communities as the ones that are able to manage the resource and to protect them.
So, Flavia, moving over to policy for a second, I had read, I think it was an article maybe or a case study, and I think it released in June or July of this year, and you were one of the authors on it, and it was talking about transboundary freshwater protection. And I know that you've worked extensively in this area, and the question I would have for you, if you could talk about that report, obviously, but also, what are some of the biggest opportunities and challenges in getting countries to work together, on shared rivers and basins, inside the region of the Amazon, or in the global community as well?
Maybe just to quickly compliment Fernanda, and then I'll get to your question. So one of TNC's approaches, working with communities is a very basic approach for us. So from the policy perspective, one thing that we're doing is policy analysis across countries to see what measures, especially area-based measures, so protected areas and conserved areas, what existing national legislation already offers. In the case of Brazil, is the fisheries agreements. We have community managed areas in Tanzania, similar figures all around the Lake Tanganyika. So we are trying to see, but sometimes, just go back a little, sometimes you have this legal figures that have just never been used because protection efforts have focused so much on conventional protected areas that's focused more on the land, and fisheries, the use of conserved areas for inland fisheries is also another tool that has been very underused. So TNC is trying to work more strongly with that with our scientists. And then Transboundary, yes. So maybe 3 points on that. There are a number of agreements between states all over the world to manage the freshwater resources that they share. Some covering the entire basin, some bilateral, just covering a tributary. So there's no an overall picture. There's a lot of variety, especially because water can be so context specific. But one thing that we still see is that many of these agreements, especially when they are older, they were not designed, or the mandates of the transboundary institutions were not thought of taking account of climate change. So mechanisms for flexibility instead of volumetric distribution of rights, something more flexible, like you have in national policies. What do you do when you have long-term drought, climate change, and variability? How do you adjust how the different countries without having to revise the entire agreement, which can take forever? So there's a lot of work for countries and for legal advisors to go back to the agreements that they already have and see what the best approaches are, the fastest one, right? The most pragmatic approaches can be to mainstream climate change into transboundary cooperation. And then the second point is, because freshwater really doesn't respect boundaries, right? It's constantly flowing. Because of that, the sediments, the nutrients, the species, the aquatic species do not stay in one place, and they cross boundaries, even if the countries might say that they don't, that they are their own property. They keep moving, which means that climate measures that countries take in the name of climate mitigation can have transboundary effects, which means they have to sometimes in the eagerness to achieve mitigation goals, you end up causing transboundary effects on your neighbors and the local communities that depend on. And that's not something that has been considered, the transboundary dimensions of climate change that are for freshwater, but can be even at a wider scale, global scale. And then when you get to adaptation, there are a lot of scenarios that we see that where countries think at the basin level, the measures that they adopt for adaptation can be much more cost effective because you play on the trade-offs, you play on the different countries' strengths. You may think of compensation measures. So one country protects connectivity upstream, and the other countries contribute to measures that would benefit the countries that decided not to build a dam, and that's happening. That exists. It's not some crazy talk on my part, but it's not as mainstreamed as it should be, and hence the importance of mainstreaming concretely this new thinking in terms of how countries cooperate on the resources that they share, and that includes freshwater, but also biodiversity and other natural resources. I guess the point being then that transboundary dimension through freshwater is crucial for both mitigation, climate mitigation, and adaptation planning.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads really well into the next question I was going to ask, and that's really looking at, some of Nature Conservancy's bold global targets. The note that I have down is one of the 2030 goals is 1 million kilometers of rivers and 30 million hectares of lakes, wetlands, and floodplains conserved or restored by 2030. That's the Nature Conservancy's goal. And I think on the conversation on transboundary freshwater protection, this kind of ties in very nicely. So could you talk about, that global target that TNC has, and then maybe, elaborate on, what the progress is as we're in 2025. We're less than 5 years out from the goal. But yeah, could you just talk about that goal, progress, and then, maybe even tie it back to transboundary freshwater protection.
Sure. Yeah, and TNC is very committed to those goals, to sticking to that deadline of 2030, both because it's been never more important to achieve progress on conservation for freshwater, but also for climate, our people goals. And they are very interconnected, right? If you advance the freshwater protection goals, you contribute to climate. If you advance on climate, you contribute to people, and that has an impact on freshwater. So all the goals are very interconnected in the sense that um, TNC tries to move on them uh, as a collective, right? As a package of things that we must achieve by 2030. And that's also aligned with other global agendas like the Sustainable Development Goals, the global biodiversity framework. And so we are moving together with the countries and the wider global community to get to those goals. So TNC remains committed, and it's our motto to scale and to optimize how we get there. On the transboundary, because I said before, water is so fluid. So the way our freshwater work is organized, it is scaling by nature because we don't work, um, for the most part, we don't work country by country, but we work at the transboundary, at the entire basin. And either in places where we're not directly present on the ground, we are closely collaborating with partners so that we can really achieve that basin-wide vision. So maybe a couple of examples. In the Lake Tanganyika, Fernanda knows this work very well too. On the Lake Tanganyika, our program, our Lake Tanganyika program is TNC's presence is for Zambia and Tanzania, but we're now moving to work also in Burundi and DRC together with our partners so that we really have the around the lake with adequate protection and sustainable management measures. And we're also moving upstream to cover the catchment because if you protect just around the lake is super important for critical habitats for fish. But within that transboundary and basin-wide approach, we understand that we need to protect the catchment upstream, where you'll also have rivers running at the core of these upstream areas, and you at the same time that you have deforestation, which then leads to sedimentation down the lake, which then affects fish. So, because of all these interconnections, basin level work is super important, and in most places, basin level means transboundary. And from the policy perspective, that means looking at policy solutions that can be harmonized across the four countries, or working with the basin organization, which is the Lake Tanganyika Authority. We recently supported the countries on the development of an aquaculture protocol, which means harmonizing standards and criteria to ensure that aquaculture is developed in the most sustainable way. So then you have a transboundary instrument. And in the Amazon, coming from a little bit slightly different perspective, TNC is a member of the Amazon Waters Alliance, and that as members of the alliance, we joined the network of networks of many organizations working in the Amazon. And all these organizations, water, forest, um, more focused on communities, we decided to come together in this big network, realizing that all these different biomes or realms are interconnected. And part of this collaboration was developing I don't remember 8-point plan or 6-point plan to bring it to the countries that are members of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization as a contribution from civil society and other partners, universities, legal institutions. So these are our ideas presented to the countries, presented to the organization to say these are things that we believe are super priorities, and more than that, these are things that we are prepared to support you with. We're not just telling you, hey, countries do things. We want to work on this together. So, and that's a way to, from us, TNC, with our partners, influencing how transboundary cooperation is happening under the umbrella of basin organizations. So just a couple of examples of how we're trying to scale.
Yeah, the note that I wrote down, TNC's freshwater strategy is not by country, but by basin. And yeah, I just think how complex that is. And you just described it about how, if you advocate for policy and you advocate for, different things in these areas, you have to have these separate countries on board and these countries working together at the basin level. So that can definitely be tricky. I would say at times, for sure.
Yep. Yep. And maybe just to answer to that, there's a lot of sovereignty issues, right? Countries claim that the water within their territory is their property, and that's a anthropocentric construction because we know that water flows. But as lawyers, we need to work within the rules of international law and how countries see their own sovereignty. So really, when you work at that level, the idea is balancing, right? Balancing the different rights, trying to find for the most part solutions that are beneficial for all countries, so that we show that if you don't cooperate, maybe your immediate benefit will be higher, but in the long term, if you cooperate, all the countries will be better off in terms of development, environment, and the communities that depend. So that's the approach we need to have, and understanding that when we're working with agreements, the governments own that. We're there to support. We're not there to tell them what to do. On the contrary, ultimately they are the ones leading the work, but we are there to support them and to identify those opportunities, and then also to link, because if you see some experiences that that those efforts can have very strong impact all the way to the local communities. So how do you make these linkages between the big transboundary intergovernmental work to things that are happening with border communities, for example, how they also cross? So yeah, it's challenging, but it has worked in many places.
Yeah, I just drew like a little sketch on my notepad of like countries and then how it would look with the water basin and how the different countries would kind of share these different areas. And to your point with water flowing, it makes me think of like how water is a system. And if you have, let's say, 3 countries are sharing a basin, 2 countries are on board, and we're doing everything the right way in freshwater protection. But then the third country is not on board. Since the water is flowing, then, that one country that's not on board could negatively impact the flow of water to the other 2 countries in the basin. So yeah, it's not a easy task, I'd say, by any means, and definitely cooperation's needed. Transboundary, as we keep going back to.
President, I just would like to complement this subject that we were discussing about this transboundary, and providing some example about what we are developing here in the Amazon. We have a very long migratory fish that it's called dorada. It migrates from the Atlantic Ocean to the Andes, so it's more than 11,000 kilometers of river. These species are in threats, and they were included in the Appendix 2 from the Convention of Migratory Species. So as in the Appendix 2, these species need some attention and some action plan to them to recover the status of conservation. So as we are talking about this transboundary collision network of institutions, we, as Flavia mentioned, we are part of this Amazon Water Alliance. There are many institutions that are working together to improve the the connectivity and the water quality and all the aspects of freshwater preservation in the Amazon. And in this alliance, we are developing a regional action plan for this species. So we are working together with the government from many of these countries that has these that are connected in the Amazon to develop these some actions to protect this species. So we are working with governments, with universities, and with local institutions, local NGOs to develop actions for these species. And it falls with something that you mentioned, that if we don't have a country that it's not part of this network, can be a problem. For example, Colombia is not didn't sign for the Convention of Migratory Species. So, but we are working together with many institutions in Colombia, many research institutions, many NGOs, and to even they are not, they didn't sign for the Convention of Migratory Species. They are engaged in this action plan. So it's something that we are working together in this transboundary issue. If we think about how to promote fisheries as a source of food that is environmental friendly, I think we will achieve our objective to fight against this crisis of climate change. So, but to do it, we need that policy to recognize, to have freshwater fisheries and freshwater resource in the action plans and the biodiversity plans and adaptation plans. We need to recognize the importance of these communities as the ones that manage and protect and maintain all this biodiversity and this high level food that is being produced in the Amazon. So I think that what we should show in this COP, and we will achieve is this recognition of the Amazon as not as its storage carbon, but also all this environmentally friendly way of to produce food that is not that doesn't impact the environment. So for climate change effects, it's very important.
Maybe just to say, Preston, that working with freshwater, especially at the transboundary level, Fernanda, I think, would agree. You have to be creative. You have to be hopeful. If a country is not interested, you have to find ways to work with partners. There's always something you can do pending the ideal scenario. So you need to keep that in mind. So in terms of the official negotiations, water is most prominent in the global goal on adaptation. So like I said before, mitigation has been at the front lines of historically. And now finally we have a set of targets that will frame how countries think about adaptation, plan adaptation. And the great news is that freshwater is there explicitly and implicitly very strongly on most of natural disasters are water related, and their impacts are much greater than other kinds of disasters. You have access to water and sanitation. You have both nature-based solutions for water security, and you have a strong consideration of how vulnerable ecosystems are including freshwater, because that has been left out. I think if we can get the indicators, which is what countries, the next step to monitoring, if we can get the indicators right for the global goal on adaptation, it will set the stage for accelerated progress going forward, including to how TNC works on freshwater adaptation on the national policy level. So maybe just to end with a word of hope. It never gets boring, right, Fernanda? We always have stuff to do. Sometimes it's a little bit maddening, but we're making progress. We're moving forward, and I'm very proud to be at an organization that recognizes the importance of water, and also very proud that DNC is a member of the Freshwater Challenge, which is a coalition that brings countries together to accelerate action on freshwater ecosystem protection and restoration. And there's a lot of movement there, and I think we're making a lot of positive noise to accelerate the progress that has been achieved so far.